Hey guys, welcome back to Sleeping Stone Whispers. Tonight, we're going to take you on a slow, calming journey back to ancient Rome, to experience what it was really like to ride a Roman chariot. From the quiet early mornings in the stables, to brushing the horses and checking every little wheel and strap, we'll move step by step through a day in the life of a charioteer, all at a gentle, relaxing pace. As you listen, let your mind drift with the slow clatter of wheels and the soft shuffle of hooves, letting the details of the chariot, the horses, and the warm Roman sun wash over you like a soothing lullaby. Every small sound, every careful movement, is part of the rhythm that will help you relax, unwind, and slowly drift into sleep. So, if you're ready to relax and let history carry you into a calm, peaceful slumber, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Sleeping Stone Whispers. We have many more slow, soothing journeys waiting for you, each designed to help you sleep, relax, and dream through the ages. The first light of dawn barely touched the rooftops of the small Roman village as the stable doors creaked open. The air was cool, carrying a faint scent of hay, straw, and the lingering warmth of horses that had spent the night inside. For anyone used to the quiet of early mornings, this hour was almost sacred, a moment when the world seemed paused, and every small sound carried farther than it would during the busy day ahead. Inside the stable, the chariot rested silently on its wooden frame. Its wheels, polished the night before, caught the faint glow of sunlight, reflecting soft amber highlights on their metal rims. The harnesses hung neatly on hooks, each strap arranged just so, and the leather smelled faintly of oil and age. Everything had its place, and part of the quiet morning routine was simply noticing the details, the slight warp of a wooden beam, the tiny scratches on the metal fittings, the way dust had settled along the edges. Nearby, the horses stirred. They stretched slowly, lifting their heads and blinking against the light. Their hooves shuffled softly against the straw, and the gentle rustle of tails created a rhythmic, calming sound. Feeding them was the first task of the day. Oats were measured with care, barley counted slowly into bowls, and water was poured just enough so that it didn't splash or spill. Every movement, though seemingly mundane, demanded attention. A horse that was hurried or mishandled could easily spook, and part of preparing for a chariot ride was patience, repetition, and observation. The charioteer, or the one who would ride today, moved deliberately. He checked each wheel, turning it slowly to feel for resistance, noting the faint creak as it shifted. The leather straps of the harness were rubbed gently with cloths, smoothed and straightened. Tools lay nearby, small hammers, awls, brushes, and oil flasks, all ready for use. Nothing happened quickly in this hour, even small adjustments took time, and the pace was slow, measured, almost meditative. Outside, the village began to stir. A rooster crowed, faint and distant, and a dog barked somewhere down the street. But inside the stable, the world remained calm. Every sound, the soft swish of a tail, the slight squeak of leather, the faint clatter of a bucket, became part of the morning's rhythm. It was a rhythm meant not for speed or excitement, but for awareness, for noticing every small detail before the day began. For anyone listening, following along, or imagining themselves here, it was easy to feel the quiet settling around them, like a warm, soft blanket, preparing them for the slow, long journey of the day. And so, the early morning passed, almost unnoticed, a gentle introduction to life with the chariot and the horses. Everything was in place. Everything was calm. The world waited, just for a moment, before the work of riding, adjusting, and moving would begin. With the early morning sunlight streaming in through the stable windows, the next task was the wheels. A chariot was nothing without its wheels, and anyone who rode one knew that even the smallest imperfection could make the day uncomfortable, noisy, or uneven. So, inspection was thorough, methodical, and slow, precisely the kind of activity that could lull someone into calm attentiveness. Each wheel was examined carefully, starting with the wooden rims. The charioteer ran his fingers along the smooth surface, noting any small cracks or splinters. He tapped lightly with a knuckle, listening for the hollow sound that indicated stability, and then with a soft, repetitive rhythm checked the tightness of the metal fittings around the hub. It was a repetitive process, one wheel at a time, each motion deliberate and measured. The spokes were next. Each spoke was counted silently, a small, meditative ritual. 1, 2, 3, all the way to the last spoke. Then, each was pressed lightly, tested for firmness, checked to ensure that the wood had not warped overnight. A loose spoke might not matter at first, but over the course of the day, it could create subtle wobbling, an uneven rhythm that the horses would feel and react to. The charioteer adjusted, tapped, and straightened, taking care not to rush. The metal rims were polished gently with a cloth that had been moistened with a small amount of oil. The process was slow, methodical, almost hypnotic. The cloth rubbed over each surface, catching the first rays of light and making the wheels gleam faintly. Tiny scratches and imperfections were noticed, but there was no hurry to remove them. It was enough just to see, to touch, and to make small corrections where necessary. Even the ground beneath the wheels received attention. Dust and straw were brushed aside, small pebbles moved, and the surface was cleared so that the chariot could roll smoothly when the time came. The stable smelled faintly of hay, leather, and polished wood, a comforting mixture that seemed to reinforce the slow, steady rhythm of the morning. By the time the wheels had been fully inspected, tapped, adjusted, and polished, the charioteer paused. He ran his hands lightly over the surfaces one final time, noting the warmth of the sun on the metal and wood, the softness of the straw beneath his feet, the faint breathing of the horses nearby. It was a small moment, but a necessary one, a pause in the gentle rhythm of preparation before moving to the next set of tasks. And so, with wheels aligned, polished, and ready, the quiet day continued. Nothing was hurried, nothing was loud. The sound of breathing, soft scraping, and slow movements filled the stable. Every detail mattered, yet none demanded excitement. It was slow, repetitive, and calming, the perfect beginning to a day with the chariot. Once the wheels had been inspected and polished, the charioteer turned his attention to the horses. They stood quietly, tall and patient, their coats slightly ruffled from a night's sleep. Brushing the horses was not a task to rush. Every stroke of the brush mattered, not only for cleanliness but also for the calm, steady connection it created between human and animal. The first horse was led gently forward. Its hooves scraped softly against the straw as it shifted weight from one leg to another. The charioteer picked up a stiff bristled brush, running it along the horse's neck in slow, downward strokes. Each movement was deliberate, rhythmic, and soothing. Dust and small pieces of straw came loose, falling quietly to the ground. The horse's ears twitched slightly, responding to the touch, and its breathing was slow and steady. Attention moved to the mane. Fingers combed through each strand, untangling small knots and smoothing the hair. The process took time, patience, and a quiet focus. Occasionally, The horse would shake its head gently, dislodging a few loose strands, and the charioteer would simply adjust, continuing the slow rhythm. There was no need for haste. Every motion, the brushing, the smoothing, the small adjustments, was part of the morning's unhurried ritual. The second horse was next, and the process repeated. Brushing, smoothing, checking the legs for small scrapes or swelling, adjusting the hooves in tiny ways. The charioteer sometimes paused to listen, hearing the subtle creak of a stable door or the soft rustle of straw underfoot. These small, almost imperceptible sounds became part of the calm background, a rhythm that blended with the gentle breathing of the horses and the faint warmth of the morning sun. Once the horses had been brushed and inspected, the charioteer used a soft cloth to wipe away any remaining dust, polishing the coat until it had a faint, natural shine. The gentle pressure, the repetitive motion, the slow, deliberate care, it all contributed to a sense of quiet order, a preparation not only for the day but for the steady, methodical pace of riding. Finally, the horses stood calmly side by side. Their coats were smooth, their muscles relaxed, and the soft warmth of the early morning sun touched their backs. For the charioteer, this was a small but essential achievement. The horses were ready, not just for the work ahead but for the slow, almost hypnotic rhythm of life in the stable and, later, on the road. And so, with the horses brushed and the wheels ready, the day continued at its unhurried pace. Each small task, repeated and observed carefully, contributed to a sense of calm. The stable was quiet, orderly, and predictable, a perfect place to begin a slow journey into history, one step, one stroke, one breath at a time. With the horses brushed and calm, the next task was selecting the reins. It might seem like a simple, even mundane task, but for anyone who had ridden a chariot, choosing the right reins was essential. Each pair of reins had its own texture, flexibility, and weight, and the charioteer knew that even a small difference could affect the comfort of the ride. Several sets were laid out neatly on a wooden rack near the stable wall. Leather of various shades, some darker, some lighter, each treated with oil and carefully conditioned to prevent cracking. The charioteer picked up one set, feeling the smoothness between his fingers. He bent the leather slightly, listening to the faint creak it made. Then another, stiffer and slightly rougher. The choice was deliberate. Each pair needed to fit comfortably in the hand while providing just enough control over the horses without creating unnecessary strain. The process was slow. One set was placed back on the rack. Another was examined, rubbed gently, and then returned. Sometimes, the charioteer ran the reins through his fingers multiple times, checking for inconsistencies or rough spots. The smell of leather, warm and faintly earthy, filled the quiet stable. The horses shifted slightly in response, their hooves brushing softly against the straw. Each movement, each subtle sound, blended into the slow rhythm of preparation. Eventually, a pair was chosen. It was soft, yet firm enough to provide control, and the charioteer felt a small sense of satisfaction. The reins were laid carefully across a table, ready to be attached later. The moment of choice, while seemingly insignificant, was part of a long chain of small, methodical steps that defined the calm pace of the morning. After selecting the reins, the charioteer took a few moments to inspect them one last time. The loops were even, the leather unfrayed, and the ends smooth. He rolled them gently, letting the soft weight rest in his hands, and allowed himself to notice the quiet around him, the faint creak of the stable doors, the soft rustle of straw, the steady breathing of the horses. It was a rhythm that could easily lull someone into a sense of calm, each small task repeated with patience and care. By the time the reins were chosen and inspected, the day was slowly unfolding. Nothing had been hurried. The stable remained quiet, ordered, and predictable. Every small detail, the brushing of horses, the polishing of wheels, the careful selection of reins, built a slow, steady rhythm, preparing both the charioteer and the horses for the long, measured journey ahead. And so, with the reins selected and the horses calm, the morning moved forward, each small, repetitive task reinforcing the gentle, sleepy cadence of life in the Roman stable. After selecting the reins, the charioteer's attention turned to the leather straps. These straps connected the horses to the chariot, securing the harnesses and ensuring that every movement would be safe, steady, and controlled. It was a slow, meticulous process, one that required patience, attention to detail, and a gentle hand. Each strap was lifted from its hook and examined carefully. The leather was rubbed gently with fingertips, feeling for any stiffness, cracks, or signs of wear. Even the faintest imperfection could make the ride uncomfortable for the horses or challenging for the charioteer. Every loop, every buckle, every small stitch received quiet scrutiny. The straps were bent, twisted slightly, and then returned to their original position. Nothing was rushed. The buckles themselves were polished and inspected as well. Tiny scratches or irregularities were noted, and any loose rivets were gently tapped to ensure firmness. The metal had a faint sheen from previous oiling, and the smell of warm leather mixed with the subtle metallic scent of bronze. Each strap was unrolled and then re-rolled, a repetitive motion that required patience but also created a calm rhythm throughout the stable. Next, the charioteer attached a few straps temporarily, testing their flexibility and stretch. He pulled them lightly, feeling the resistance and observing the way the leather responded. A strap that stretched too much or felt uneven would be set aside for later repair. The horses shifted occasionally, adjusting their weight and twitching their ears. Each small sound, the faint shuffle of hooves, the creak of leather, the soft scraping of the straw, added to the slow cadence of preparation. After checking each strap, the charioteer laid them neatly across a wooden bench, straightened and aligned. He stepped back and ran his hands over them one more time, ensuring that each was ready for attachment to the harness. The process, though repetitive, was calming. It encouraged focus, patience, and an awareness of the minute details that defined a successful, smooth ride. By the time all the straps had been inspected and prepared, the stable felt even quieter. The horses stood calmly, the wheels gleamed faintly in the morning light, and the reins rested gently on the table. Every small step, from brushing the horses to polishing the wheels, to choosing the reins and checking the leather straps, reinforced a deliberate, unhurried rhythm. And so, with the leather straps ready, the charioteer paused for a moment, feeling the stable's calm settle over him. The morning was moving slowly, steadily, and predictably, perfect conditions for both preparation and reflection before the chariot ride would finally begin. With the leather straps inspected and neatly arranged, the charioteer turned to the metal fixtures of the chariot. Bronze fittings, buckles, nails, and small hinges all needed careful attention. Though they were small components, each one played an important role in ensuring that the chariot would move smoothly and safely. Polishing them was not a task to rush, it was a slow, methodical process, perfect for settling the mind and focusing on the quiet rhythm of the morning. The charioteer picked up a small cloth and dabbed it lightly in a bowl of oil. He began with the metal rings that connected the harness to the reins. Each ring was rubbed gently, moved in slow, circular motions until the dull surface caught the faint morning light and gleamed softly. Tiny scratches and imperfections became more visible under the sunlight, but there was no need to remove them immediately. Observing each detail, feeling the texture under fingertips, and repeating the motion became part of the calm cadence of preparation. Next, the buckles were examined one by one. Some had faint traces of rust or wear, which were wiped away carefully. The charioteer tapped them lightly, listening to the faint metallic ring that indicated firmness. Any buckle that resisted or moved loosely was set aside for later adjustment. The repetition of these small movements, the rubbing, the tapping, the smoothing, was almost hypnotic. It allowed the mind to focus entirely on the task at hand while the world outside the stable began to stir. The nails and hinges on the wheels were checked in a similar manner. Each nail was pressed gently to ensure it was secure. The hinges connecting wooden panels to the main frame were oiled and rotated slowly, feeling for stiffness or uneven resistance. The faint scent of oil mixed with the warmth of the wood, the cool metal, and the earthy smell of the straw, creating a subtle, calming atmosphere. Once all the metal fixtures had been polished and inspected, the charioteer stepped back to observe his work. The bronze shone faintly in the early light, the leather straps rested neatly, and the wheels gleamed softly. The horses, nearby, shifted slightly in the straw but remained calm. Every small movement, the soft rubbing of cloth on metal, the gentle tapping, the repeated inspection, reinforced the steady, unhurried rhythm of the morning. And so, with the metal fixtures polished, the stable remained quiet and orderly. The day had begun slowly, deliberately, with each small task performed in patient, repetitive detail. It was a world of soft sounds, subtle movements, and gentle observations, the perfect setting for a long, calm preparation before the chariot ride would finally begin. After polishing the metal fixtures, the charioteer turned his attention to the harnesses. Harnesses were not merely straps and leather, they were the connection between horse and chariot, between strength and control, and selecting the right one required both care and patience. There were several harnesses to choose from, each slightly different in length, thickness, and flexibility, and every detail mattered for a smooth, controlled ride. The charioteer examined the first harness. Its leather was soft and worn in just enough to be pliable, yet firm enough to hold its shape under pressure. He bent it slowly, testing the flexibility and listening to the faint creak of the leather. Then he inspected the stitching, feeling each seam carefully to ensure that it would not fray or tear under strain. Tiny imperfections were noted but not immediately alarming. Observation was the first step, correction could come later. Next, he picked up a thicker harness. It had been oiled the previous evening and smelled faintly of waxed leather. He ran his fingers along the edges, checking for rough spots, and bent it at each joint. The loops and buckles were polished and aligned, and the charioteer made small adjustments, ensuring that each strap would fit precisely around the horse's body. The process was slow, deliberate, and repetitive, the kind of work that encouraged calm focus and a quiet mind. Each harness was laid out on a bench and inspected in turn. Some were heavier, some lighter, some longer, some shorter. The charioteer occasionally compared two side by side, noting the subtle differences in texture, smell, and flexibility. He lifted, pressed, bent, and straightened each harness, moving methodically and quietly. The horses shifted their weight softly, making faint scraping sounds in the straw, which blended seamlessly with the rhythmic motions of the morning routine. Finally, after careful consideration, a harness was chosen. It was soft, strong, and well-fitted, ready to secure the horses comfortably to the chariot. The charioteer ran his fingers over it one last time, feeling the smoothness of the leather, the warmth from the morning sun, and the subtle weight of each buckle and strap. There was satisfaction in this quiet decision, a sense that everything was in its proper place, orderly and ready for the slow, steady work ahead. With the harness selected, the morning continued at its unhurried pace. The horses were calm, the wheels were polished, the metal gleamed faintly, and every strap and buckle had been carefully examined. Each small, repetitive task, the brushing, the polishing, the choosing, reinforced a steady rhythm, a deliberate slowness that made the stable feel timeless and serene, perfect for settling the mind before the day's journey would begin. With the harness selected, it was time to feed the horses. Feeding might seem like a simple task, but in a Roman stable, it required patience, precision, and careful attention. The morning meal was a quiet, methodical ritual, part of the rhythm that defined the start of the day. Every bowl, every handful, and every grain mattered, not for excitement, but for the steady, calming order of the routine. The charioteer measured the oats first. Using a small wooden scoop, he carefully filled each horse's feeding bowl, counting slowly to ensure the correct amount. 1, 2, 3, each grain seemed to take its place deliberately, contributing to the overall balance of nourishment. The horses shifted their weight in anticipation, sniffing the bowls, but waiting patiently for the oats to be poured. Their soft snorts and gentle shuffling blended with the quiet rustle of straw underfoot. Next came the barley. The charioteer added it slowly, mixing it with the oats in each bowl. He tapped the bowls lightly to settle the grains, making sure they were evenly distributed. Sometimes a stray piece fell to the straw, and the horse would nudge it with its nose. The charioteer simply watched, letting the small, repetitive sounds and movements fill the calm stable. There was no rush, no urgency, just the quiet rhythm of preparation. Once the bowls were ready, the charioteer placed them on the ground in front of the horses. He watched carefully as each horse bent its head to eat. Their teeth crunched softly, breaking the grains, while their ears twitched gently at distant sounds, the faint creak of the stable door, the soft shuffle of straw, or the low murmur of another horse. The act of feeding was deliberate and slow, a moment to observe, notice, and appreciate the small details of the stable's quiet life. After the horses had begun eating, the charioteer took a moment to tidy the area. Extra straw was straightened, stray pieces of grain were swept aside, and the bowls were adjusted so they rested evenly. Even small movements, repeated carefully, became part of the morning's gentle rhythm. The stable smelled faintly of oats and barley, mixed with warm leather and polished wood, a comforting combination that reinforced the sense of calm. By the time the feeding was complete, the morning had continued its unhurried pace. The horses chewed quietly, their bodies relaxed and ready for the day ahead. Each small task, from inspecting wheels to brushing coats, selecting reins and harnesses, and finally feeding, built a slow, steady cadence. It was a day that moved deliberately, quietly, and predictably, perfect for anyone listening, observing, or imagining themselves drifting slowly through this peaceful Roman stable. After the horses had finished eating, the charioteer turned his attention to the wooden frame of the chariot. Though the wood had been polished the day before, overnight dust had settled quietly on its surfaces. Removing this dust was a slow, repetitive process, requiring patience, care, and gentle, deliberate motions. It was another task that contributed to the calm, measured rhythm of the morning. The charioteer picked up a soft cloth, folded neatly over his hand, and began at the front of the chariot. He ran the cloth along the edges of the frame, brushing slowly and evenly. Tiny specks of dust rose slightly in the morning light, falling back softly onto the straw-strewn floor. Each stroke of the cloth was methodical, tracing the contours of the wood, paying attention to every joint, curve, and seam. Next, he moved along the sides of the chariot, working from top to bottom. The wood beneath his fingers was smooth, slightly warm from the sun streaming through the stable windows. He noticed small variations in color and texture, the faint grain of the timber, and even the faint creak that occurred when he pressed lightly. The repetitive motion of wiping, combined with the soft ambient sounds of the stable, created a gentle, hypnotic rhythm. Every corner and crevice received careful attention. The charioteer bent slightly, moving slowly so as not to disturb the polished metal fixtures or the carefully arranged straps and reins. He brushed lightly around the wheel hubs, over the beams connecting the front to the back, and along the supports that would bear the horse's weight. Each movement was deliberate, slow, and careful. There was no hurry, no noise, no urgency, just the quiet, meditative repetition of motion. Occasionally, he paused to observe the effect. The frame gleamed faintly in the morning light, dust removed, edges smooth, and surfaces evenly polished. He stepped back, ran his hands lightly along the frame one final time, and took note of the calm order of the stable. The horses shifted slightly in the straw, their gentle snuffles blending with the soft swish of the cloth on wood. By the time the wooden frame had been thoroughly wiped, the chariot looked neat, orderly, and ready for the day's tasks. The stable remained quiet and steady, the morning unfolding at its slow, deliberate pace. Each small, repetitive step, from inspecting wheels to brushing horses, polishing metal, selecting reins and harnesses, feeding, and now wiping the frame, built a sense of rhythm and calm. For anyone present, or anyone imagining the scene, it was a peaceful, sleepy introduction to life with a Roman chariot, a world where every detail mattered, and every motion encouraged quiet reflection and relaxation. With the chariot polished, the harnesses selected, and the horses fed and calm, the charioteer moved to another slow, deliberate task, measuring the distance for the day's ride. This was not an exciting activity, nor was it urgent, but it was necessary. Knowing the distance, the terrain, and the pacing of the journey allowed for a measured, controlled ride that would be smooth for both horses and chariot. First, the charioteer retrieved a simple measuring rope from the stable. It was long, sturdy, and marked at regular intervals. Carefully, he laid it out along the dirt path just outside the stable, straight and taut. Each step he took was slow, deliberate, counting quietly as the rope extended along the ground. 1 step, 2 steps, 3, the numbers progressed steadily, each one marking a small, insignificant increment of distance, yet collectively forming the total length of the ride. The path itself was observed carefully. Tiny pebbles, uneven patches, and soft spots of soil were noted. A branch had fallen from a nearby tree overnight, and the charioteer moved it aside gently, so that the wheels would roll smoothly. Each observation was made slowly, almost meditatively. He adjusted the rope slightly, remeasured small sections, and noted any inconsistencies in the terrain. Once the rope had been fully extended and the distance calculated, the charioteer marked the end point with a small stake. This quiet marker, simple and unassuming, would serve as a guide during the ride, ensuring that the pace remained measured and predictable. Even minor details, such as the position of the stake or the alignment of the rope along the path, received careful attention. After finishing the measurement, the charioteer stepped back and observed the entire course. The morning light fell softly across the path, casting faint shadows from trees and fences. The horses shifted slightly in the straw, their calm breathing blending with the faint rustle of leaves outside. The stable remained quiet and orderly, each task, from brushing horses to polishing the chariot, feeding, and now measuring the path, adding to the gentle rhythm of the morning. The process of measuring, slow and repetitive as it was, provided a sense of preparedness. Every step, every count, every adjustment contributed to a smooth, steady ride later. For anyone present or imagining themselves here, the careful pace of these small tasks reinforced a sense of calm. The day had begun methodically, deliberately, and without rush, the perfect rhythm for drifting into thought, or into sleep. With the distance for the day measured and the path carefully noted, the charioteer turned his attention to the seat of the chariot. The seat was small, firm, and made of polished wood, yet even slight misalignment could affect the comfort and balance during the ride. Adjusting it was a slow, meticulous process, one that demanded patience and steady hands. The charioteer first examined the seat from all angles. He knelt beside it, running his fingers along the edges and the surface, noting any rough spots or imperfections. The wood was smooth, warmed by the morning sun, but a small grain or bump could create an uneven experience while riding. Each detail was observed carefully, with repeated touches and adjustments, until he was satisfied that the surface was even and comfortable. Next, he checked the seat's position relative to the chariot frame. A slight shift forward or backward could alter the balance and weight distribution when the horses pulled the vehicle. The charioteer moved the seat slowly, a few millimeters at a time, then sat lightly to test the feel. He leaned forward, backward, and side to side, paying attention to the subtle pressure on the legs, hips, and lower back. The adjustments were minute, almost imperceptible, yet they contributed to a smoother, steadier ride. The leather padding on the seat was examined next. It was thin but sturdy, designed to cushion without bending under weight. The charioteer pressed lightly, smoothing it with his hands and checking for folds or wrinkles. He straightened the edges and adjusted the straps securing the padding in place. Even small movements were repeated several times, each stroke slow and deliberate, contributing to the rhythm of preparation. Once the seat had been adjusted, the charioteer stepped back to observe the chariot as a whole. Wheels gleamed faintly in the morning light, metal fixtures polished, straps and reins carefully arranged, horses calm, and the path measured. The seat, in its proper position, seemed ready to receive a rider. The process of adjusting it had been unhurried, methodical, and precise, each small action reinforcing the slow, deliberate pace of the morning. Finally, he ran his fingers along the edges of the seat one last time, appreciating the quiet, orderly environment of the stable. The morning continued in its steady, measured rhythm. Every small task, from inspecting wheels to brushing horses, feeding, measuring the path, and now adjusting the seat, added to a sense of calm, preparing both the charioteer and anyone observing to continue the day in a deliberate, unhurried pace. With the seat adjusted and every small part of the chariot in place, the charioteer turned his attention to the horses once more. Before any journey, it was important to listen, to hear the subtle rhythm of their breathing, to notice the slight shifts in weight, and to understand their calmness or tension. This task was slow, quiet, and meditative, perfect for encouraging focus and a gentle sense of calm. The charioteer knelt beside the first horse, his hand resting lightly on its flank. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the faint rise and fall of the horse's chest. Each breath was soft, steady, and deliberate. He counted them slowly, 1, 2, 3, each inhalation and exhalation marking a tiny moment of time. The warmth of the horse pressed gently against his hand, and the faint scent of hay, oats, and warm leather filled the air. He moved along the horse's body, feeling the muscles shift under each breath. The legs flexed slightly, the shoulders relaxed, and the ears twitched occasionally at distant sounds, the soft creak of the stable doors, the shuffle of straw beneath hooves, or the faint call of a rooster outside. Every small movement, every subtle noise, became part of the gentle rhythm of the morning. The charioteer allowed himself to slow his own breathing to match, creating a calm, shared tempo between human and horse. Next, he observed the second horse in the same way. Hands rested lightly on its side, chest, and back, noting the softness of the coat, the warmth of the muscles, and the evenness of the breathing. Tiny irregularities, such as a skipped breath or a tense muscle, were observed quietly and calmly. There was no rush, no hurry to correct anything. Simply listening, feeling, and noticing was enough. After a few moments, the charioteer stepped back and observed both horses together. Their breaths were steady and synchronized with the gentle sway of the stable air. The soft shuffle of hooves, the faint rustle of straw, and the warm light streaming through the windows blended into a quiet, hypnotic environment. For anyone present, or anyone imagining themselves in this calm, orderly space, the gentle attention to the horse's breathing reinforced a sense of serenity, preparing the mind for the slow pace of the day ahead. By the time the horse's breathing had been noted and appreciated, the stable felt calm and steady. Every task so far, from inspecting wheels to brushing horses, selecting reins and harnesses, feeding, wiping the frame, adjusting the seat, and now listening, added to a slow, deliberate rhythm. The morning continued methodically, predictably, and peacefully, a perfect beginning to the quiet, sleepy experience of riding a Roman chariot. With the horses calm and breathing steadily, the charioteer moved on to securing the side guards of the chariot. The side guards were simple wooden panels fixed along the edges of the chariot's platform. Their purpose was not decorative, nor especially exciting. They existed to prevent slipping, to block dust, and to provide a small sense of stability during the ride. Because of this, attaching them properly was a slow and careful task. The charioteer lifted the first side guard and held it in place against the frame. He checked the alignment quietly, adjusting it by just a fraction until it rested evenly. The wood felt smooth and slightly warm from the morning air. Small holes in the panel lined up with the frame, and he inserted the wooden pegs one by one, pressing them in gently with steady pressure. Each peg made a soft, dull sound as it settled into place. The charioteer paused after every few movements, stepping back slightly to check that the panel remained straight. There was no rush. If something felt even slightly uneven, he removed the peg and tried again. The repetition of fitting, checking, and adjusting created a slow rhythm that matched the calm atmosphere of the stable. Once the first side guard was secure, the charioteer moved to the opposite side. The process was the same: lift, align, press, and pause. He ran his fingers along the edge to ensure there were no gaps. A loose guard could rattle during the ride, creating unnecessary noise and discomfort. Silence and steadiness were always preferred. As he worked, the horses remained calm behind him. Their occasional snorts and soft movements blended with the faint creak of wood and the gentle scrape of pegs sliding into place. Dust floated briefly in the air and then settled again. The light coming through the stable windows cast long, quiet shadows across the floor. After both side guards were secured, the charioteer pressed gently against each one to test their stability. They did not move. Satisfied, he wiped his hands on a cloth and took a moment to observe the chariot as a whole. Everything looked balanced, quiet, and prepared. With the side guards firmly in place, the chariot felt more complete. Another small task had been finished, not with excitement or urgency, but with patience and repetition. The morning continued its slow, predictable flow, each careful step reinforcing the calm and measured pace of life around the Roman chariot. With the side guards firmly secured, the charioteer turned his attention to one of the smallest and most repetitive tasks of the morning: counting the nails. Nails were used throughout the chariot, holding wooden panels together, reinforcing joints, and securing metal fittings. Individually, they were unremarkable. Together, they formed the quiet structure that kept everything stable. The charioteer began at the front of the chariot. He crouched low, leaning slightly forward, and ran his eyes slowly along the wooden beam. Each nail head was small and dark, pressed flush into the wood. He counted them one by one, silently and steadily. 1, 2, 3. After each number, he paused briefly, ensuring he had not missed any. He moved carefully along the beam, shifting his weight slowly so as not to disturb the chariot. The wood creaked faintly beneath him, but the sound was soft and familiar. He touched each nail lightly with the tip of his finger, confirming that it was secure. If one felt even slightly loose, he marked it in his mind for later attention. Next, he moved to the side panels. The nails here were spaced evenly, forming a simple, repeating pattern. Counting them took time, and that was expected. The charioteer did not rush. He followed the same rhythm for each panel: look, touch, count, pause. The repetition was calming, almost meditative, as if the numbers themselves were part of the morning's quiet ritual. Occasionally, he stopped to stretch his legs or adjust his position. The horses shifted softly behind him, their breathing steady and unhurried. Straw rustled faintly underfoot. Outside the stable, distant sounds of the village remained muted and indistinct, never interrupting the calm focus of the task. Once the sides were complete, the charioteer moved to the wheel hubs. The nails here were fewer but thicker, securing metal bands to wood. He counted them carefully, pressing each one gently to test its hold. The metal felt cool against his fingers, contrasting with the warmth of the wood around it. When he finished counting, the charioteer sat back on his heels and reviewed the total in his mind. Nothing was missing. Nothing was loose enough to cause concern. Satisfied, he rose slowly and brushed dust from his hands. Counting the nails had taken time, but time was never wasted in the stable. Each small, careful task added to the sense of order and calm. With the nails counted and confirmed, the chariot stood quietly, solid and dependable, waiting patiently as the slow rhythm of the morning continued. With the nails counted and confirmed, the charioteer took a moment to simply stand and observe. The morning had progressed quietly, and the sunlight now entered the stable at a slightly higher angle. As it did, it fell gently across the bronze fittings of the chariot, revealing small details that were easy to miss earlier in the day. The charioteer stepped closer and let his eyes move slowly from one fitting to the next. The bronze was not brightly polished, but it carried a soft, muted shine. Where the light touched it, the surface reflected a warm glow, neither sharp nor dazzling. The effect was subtle, changing slowly as the sun shifted. He leaned slightly to the side, watching how the light moved across a buckle near the reins. The edges appeared smoother in the glow, while tiny scratches became faintly visible. These marks were not flaws to be corrected immediately. They were simply signs of use, reminders of past journeys and repeated routines. The charioteer then turned his attention to the fittings near the wheels. Here, the bronze caught the light differently, reflecting small, uneven patches of brightness. He crouched down to observe more closely, resting his hands on his knees. The floor beneath him was cool, and the straw barely moved as he settled into place. As the sunlight continued to shift, shadows formed and softened along the chariot frame. The bronze fittings alternated between light and shade, creating a slow pattern that changed almost imperceptibly. The charioteer allowed himself to watch without urgency. There was nothing to adjust, nothing to fix. Observing was enough. Behind him, the horses stood quietly. Their breathing remained steady, and their occasional movements created soft, familiar sounds. The stable felt still and balanced, filled with the quiet presence of prepared tools, secured straps, and carefully inspected parts. After several moments, the charioteer reached out and touched one of the bronze rings lightly. It felt cool under his fingers, warmed only slightly by the sun. He wiped it once with his cloth, not to polish it further, but simply to remove a trace of dust. When he stepped back, the chariot appeared unchanged, yet the moment of observation had added to the morning's calm. Watching the sunlight had no practical urgency, but it reinforced the slow, deliberate pace of preparation. With the bronze fittings quietly glowing in the gentle light, the chariot remained still, patient, and ready. Another small, peaceful moment passed, and the steady rhythm of the day continued without interruption. After observing the quiet glow of the bronze fittings, the charioteer moved to the next task, testing the axle movement. The axle was hidden beneath the chariot, rarely noticed unless something went wrong. Because of this, it demanded careful, patient attention. Testing it was a slow and physical process, requiring deliberate movements and quiet focus. The charioteer knelt beside the wheel and placed both hands on its rim. He pushed gently, just enough to make it turn. The wheel rolled forward a short distance, then stopped. He listened closely. There was no sharp sound, only a faint, low creak that faded quickly. Satisfied, he rolled it back in the opposite direction, again slowly, again listening. He repeated this motion several times. Forward. Pause. Backward. Pause. Each movement was controlled and measured. The axle responded smoothly, without resistance or sudden stops. The charioteer adjusted his position slightly, placing his ear closer to the wheel hub. The sounds were subtle, soft wood against wood, metal resting calmly in its place. Next, He moved to the other wheel and performed the same test. Hands on the rim, gentle pressure, slow rotation. He counted the turns quietly, not for precision, but for rhythm. 1 turn. A second. A third. Each turn felt consistent, steady, and unremarkable, which was exactly what he wanted. He then checked the axle from beneath the chariot, lying carefully on the cool ground. Dust settled softly as he shifted into place. From this angle, he could see the connection points more clearly. He reached up and pressed gently along the beam, feeling for vibrations or looseness. Everything remained firm and quiet. When he rose, the charioteer brushed dust from his tunic and stepped back. The wheels were still. The axle had moved as expected, without noise or hesitation. This simple confirmation brought a quiet sense of readiness. The horses shifted slightly, their hooves making soft sounds in the straw. The stable air felt still and warm, filled with the quiet presence of preparation nearly complete. Each task had been performed slowly, carefully, and without distraction. Testing the axle did not change the appearance of the chariot, but it reinforced its reliability. Another small check had been completed, another calm moment added to the steady rhythm of the morning. The chariot waited patiently, grounded and balanced, as the slow preparation continued without hurry. With the axle tested and moving smoothly, the charioteer turned once again to the wheels. Although they had been inspected earlier, a thin layer of dried mud still clung to parts of the rims and spokes. Cleaning it was not difficult, but it required time, patience, and repetition. It was the kind of task that filled the morning quietly, without drawing attention to itself. The charioteer fetched a small bucket of water and a stiff brush. He set the bucket down carefully so it would not tip, then dipped the brush slowly into the water. The bristles darkened as they absorbed moisture. He lifted the brush and let the excess water drip back into the bucket before beginning. Starting with the first wheel, he scrubbed gently along the rim. The dried mud softened almost immediately, loosening its grip on the wood. Small flakes fell away and dropped silently to the ground. The brush moved in short, repeated strokes, each one similar to the last. Scrub, pause, rinse. Scrub, pause, rinse. The rhythm was steady and unchanging. He worked his way inward, cleaning each spoke one at a time. The charioteer turned the wheel slightly after finishing each section, moving slowly so the axle would not shift too quickly. The wheel responded with quiet obedience, rotating just enough to expose the next area. The sound of bristles against wood blended softly with the faint splash of water. Occasionally, he stopped to rinse the brush. He swirled it in the bucket, watching the water cloud briefly before settling again. The mud at the bottom formed a thin layer, undisturbed once the movement stopped. He lifted the brush, shook it once, and continued. The second wheel received the same careful attention. Nothing about the process changed. The same motions were repeated, the same pace maintained. Cleaning was not about speed, it was about consistency. The charioteer did not rush to finish. Each spoke was scrubbed evenly, each rim wiped until it felt smooth beneath his fingers. As he worked, the horses remained calm nearby. Their breathing stayed slow and steady, unaffected by the quiet sounds of brushing and water. The stable felt settled, as if everything within it had accepted the pace of the morning. When the wheels were clean, the charioteer stepped back and looked at them briefly. They were not brighter, only cleaner. The mud was gone, and the surfaces felt even and ready. He emptied the bucket outside and returned the brush to its place. With the wheels cleaned, another small task had been completed. The chariot stood quietly, unchanged in shape but slightly more prepared. The slow rhythm of the morning continued, uninterrupted, carrying the calm forward one simple action at a time. With the wheels now clean and free of mud, the charioteer turned his attention to the painted surfaces of the chariot. The paint was simple and faded, applied long ago in muted tones meant to protect the wood rather than decorate it. Inspecting it for cracks was a quiet task, one that required slow movement and careful observation rather than action. The charioteer stood close to the side of the chariot and let his eyes travel slowly along the painted panels. The surface showed gentle wear from years of use. In some places, the paint had thinned slightly, allowing the grain of the wood beneath to show through. He traced these areas with his eyes, moving inch by inch without hurry. He crouched lower to examine the paint near the bottom of the frame, where dust and moisture collected more easily. Small lines appeared here and there, fine cracks that followed the natural pattern of the wood. The charioteer pressed lightly with his fingertip, testing the surface. The paint did not flake or peel. It remained firm, even where the lines appeared. Moving slowly around the chariot, he repeated the same inspection on each side. He leaned in, stepped back, adjusted his angle, and leaned in again. The sunlight helped reveal uneven textures, while shadows softened the edges of the cracks. There was no urgency in the process. This was observation, not repair. At the rear of the chariot, he paused longer. The paint there had endured more wear from loading and unloading. He brushed a small area with his cloth, removing a thin layer of dust. The color beneath looked unchanged, quiet and stable. He nodded slightly, satisfied. The inspection continued around the front panel. Here, the paint had been touched by rains, hands, and tools over time. Small marks told the story of routine use. None of them demanded immediate attention. The charioteer noted them silently, committing their locations to memory. As he finished, he straightened and looked at the chariot as a whole. The paint was worn but intact. No cracks threatened the structure. No flakes drifted loose. Everything remained as it should, used, steady, and reliable. Inspecting the paint did not change anything visibly, yet it added to the sense of readiness. Another quiet check had been completed. The stable remained still, the horses calm, and the morning continued its slow, predictable progression. With the painted surfaces inspected and accepted as they were, the chariot stood patiently, waiting for the next small task in the long, deliberate preparation of the day. After inspecting the painted surfaces, the charioteer moved on to tightening the bolts. Bolts were scattered throughout the chariot, holding together parts that needed to remain firm under constant motion. Most of them were already secure, but checking each one was necessary. It was a quiet, repetitive task that required little thought, only patience and steady hands. The charioteer collected a small tool from the workbench and knelt beside the chariot frame. He began at the front, placing the tool gently against the first bolt. He turned it slowly, feeling for resistance. The bolt shifted only slightly, then stopped. Satisfied, he moved to the next. Each bolt was treated the same way. Press, turn, pause. Press, turn, pause. The motions were slow and deliberate, creating a rhythm that matched the calm atmosphere of the stable. Occasionally, a bolt required a bit more pressure, but none resisted strongly. Each one settled into place without sound. He worked methodically, moving from one section of the chariot to another. Along the side panels, beneath the seat, near the wheel hubs. Every location was familiar, and the sequence never changed. The repetition allowed his thoughts to drift without distraction. As he worked, the charioteer listened. The soft scrape of the tool against metal blended with the distant sounds of the stable. Horses shifted gently in the straw. Somewhere outside, a breeze moved through leaves. None of it demanded attention. Everything existed quietly in the background. When he reached the bolts near the wheels, he slowed even further. These bolts carried more strain during the ride. He tested each one carefully, turning the tool a fraction at a time. When the bolt no longer moved, he stopped. There was no need to force it further. Once all the bolts had been checked, the charioteer returned the tool to its place. He wiped his hands on a cloth and stood slowly, stretching just enough to ease his legs. The chariot looked the same as before, but beneath the surface, everything felt more secure. Tightening the bolts had added another layer of quiet assurance. Nothing rattled. Nothing shifted. The chariot remained still and balanced, prepared through patience rather than urgency. With this task complete, the morning continued its slow progression. Each small action, repeated without haste, contributed to the steady calm of the stable. The chariot waited silently, ready for whatever gentle movement would come next. With the bolts tightened and secure, the charioteer turned his attention to the long wooden pole that extended from the front of the chariot. This pole would later connect to the yoke that rested across the horse's shoulders. Aligning it properly was a careful, quiet task, one that required patience rather than strength. He stood at the front of the chariot and placed both hands lightly on the pole. The wood felt smooth and cool, worn down by years of steady use. He lifted it just enough to feel its weight, then set it back down slowly. The pole rested slightly off-center, not enough to cause concern, but enough to adjust. The charioteer crouched and adjusted the support beneath the pole. He moved it a fraction to the left, then paused. He stepped back and looked again, letting his eyes measure the alignment without rushing. The stable light revealed small shadows along the length of the pole, making it easier to judge its position. He returned to the pole and nudged it gently forward. The movement was slow, almost unnoticeable. The wood shifted with a soft sound, then settled. He stopped and checked again. Still slightly off. He adjusted once more, this time barely touching it. The yoke lay nearby, resting on the ground. He lifted it carefully and held it in place to test the alignment. The pole met it cleanly, fitting into position without strain. The charioteer held it there for a moment, ensuring nothing twisted or pressed at an angle. Satisfied, he lowered the yoke and secured the pole in its resting position. He stepped back and examined the entire setup from a distance. The pole now ran straight and true, centered and balanced. Nothing leaned. Nothing pulled. Aligning the pole did not require speed or effort, only calm attention. The process was slow, repetitive, and steady, much like the preparation of the entire chariot. Each small adjustment brought the structure closer to readiness without disrupting the quiet of the morning. The charioteer rested his hands on his knees briefly, breathing evenly. The stable remained still. The horses waited without movement. The chariot stood in quiet balance, its pole now perfectly aligned with the yoke. With this task complete, there was no immediate need to move on quickly. The day allowed for slowness. Another careful step had been finished, and the chariot remained patient, prepared through small, deliberate acts. After aligning the pole with the yoke, the charioteer turned his attention to the leather straps. These straps connected many parts of the chariot and harness system, and though they were simple in appearance, they carried an important role. Checking them for wear was a quiet task, one that unfolded slowly and without urgency. The charioteer lifted one strap and let it rest across his palm. The leather was soft from years of handling, its surface darkened by time and use. He ran his fingers along its length, feeling for any thinning or roughness. The motion was slow, steady, and repeated again and again. He examined each strap in turn. Some were short, some longer, each one looping through a familiar path around the chariot frame. He checked the edges carefully, where were tended to appear first. The leather remained smooth, flexible, and intact. Occasionally, he bent a strap gently, watching how it folded. No cracks appeared. No stiffness resisted the movement. The leather responded easily, returning to its shape when released. Satisfied, he moved on to the next. The buckles were checked next. He lifted them, turned them slightly, and let them fall back into place. They made a soft sound as they settled. Each buckle held firmly, showing no signs of weakness. The charioteer did not rush. There was no reason to hurry. As he worked, the repetitive nature of the task allowed his breathing to slow. Each strap followed the same inspection: lift, feel, bend, release. Lift, feel, bend, release. The rhythm was soothing, predictable, and calm. He moved around the chariot slowly, sometimes standing, sometimes kneeling, adjusting his position as needed. The leather carried a faint, familiar scent, reminding him of past mornings just like this one. Nothing about the process felt new or surprising. When he reached the straps near the yoke, he paused slightly longer. These endured more movement during the ride. He tested them carefully, applying a bit more pressure with his fingers. Still, they remained strong and dependable. Once all the straps had been checked, the charioteer laid them back into their resting positions. They hung naturally, neither twisted nor strained. Everything looked as it should. Checking the leather straps brought a quiet sense of completion. Another small step had been finished, adding to the steady preparation of the chariot. The stable remained peaceful, the morning unhurried. With the straps confirmed to be sound, the chariot waited patiently, ready for the next gentle task in the slow unfolding of the day. The buckles were checked next. He lifted them, turned them slightly, and let them fall back into place. They made a soft sound as they settled. Each buckle held firmly, showing no signs of weakness. The charioteer did not rush. There was no reason to hurry. As he worked, the repetitive nature of the task allowed his breathing to slow. Each strap followed the same inspection: lift, feel, bend, release. Lift, feel, bend, release. The rhythm was soothing, predictable, and calm. The charioteer picked up a small brush with stiff bristles. He held it loosely, testing its weight, then placed it gently against the seat. The first strokes were slow and light, barely disturbing the dust. A thin cloud lifted and drifted downward, settling quietly onto the ground below. He brushed in straight lines, then in small circles, covering every part of the seat evenly. Each motion followed the last, unbroken and steady. The sound of the bristles moving across the wood was faint and soft, almost blending into the stillness of the stable. He leaned closer, focusing on the corners where dust tended to gather. With careful strokes, he guided the dust outward and away. There was no need to rush. The seat would not go anywhere. Time moved slowly, allowing the task to unfold at its own pace. After brushing the top, he moved to the underside of the seat. He bent down and brushed lightly, removing dust that had settled there overnight. The brush moved rhythmically, up and down, back and forth, until the surface felt clean beneath his hand. Occasionally, he paused to tap the brush against the ground, releasing the collected dust. Each tap was gentle, producing only a soft sound. Then he returned to brushing, continuing where he left off. When the seat was free of dust, the charioteer ran his hand across it once more. The surface felt smooth and cool. No grit remained. Everything was quiet and orderly. Brushing the seat did not change the chariot's appearance much, but it added to the sense of calm preparation. Each completed task made the chariot feel more ready, not through action, but through care. The charioteer placed the brush back in its place and stepped away slightly. The seat rested clean and undisturbed. The stable remained peaceful, with no sudden sounds or movements. With the seat prepared, the chariot waited patiently. The morning continued its slow, steady progression, and the next task would arrive in its own time. With the seat brushed clean and undisturbed, the charioteer prepared to test the balance of the chariot. This was not done through movement or speed, but through stillness. The chariot remained exactly where it stood as he carefully placed his weight upon it. He stepped onto the platform slowly, 1 foot at a time. The wood beneath his sandals felt firm and familiar. He paused after placing his first foot, allowing the chariot to settle. Nothing shifted. Nothing creaked. He placed his second foot beside the first and stood quietly, hands resting at his sides. The chariot remained balanced, its weight evenly distributed across the wheels. The charioteer did not move immediately. He waited, feeling for any slight change. After a moment, he shifted his weight gently from 1 foot to the other. The movement was minimal, almost unnoticeable. The chariot responded calmly, staying steady without rocking. The wheels did not roll. The frame did not tilt. He bent his knees slightly, then straightened again. The action was slow and deliberate. The chariot held firm, as it should. This was not a test of strength, only of alignment and balance. The charioteer turned his head slightly, listening. No rattling sounds came from the frame. No loose parts announced themselves. Everything remained quiet. He adjusted his stance, moving 1 foot a small distance forward. Again, he paused. The chariot remained steady beneath him. The balance felt natural, as if the structure had been shaped precisely for this posture. After several moments of stillness, he stepped back down just as slowly as he had climbed up. 1 foot touched the ground, then the other. He stood beside the chariot and looked at it calmly. Testing the balance did not require effort or excitement. It was a quiet confirmation that all the earlier preparations had been done correctly. The chariot stood as it should, patient and dependable. The stable remained unchanged. The air was still. The horses waited calmly, their presence steady and unremarkable. With the balance confirmed, another small task had been completed. The charioteer allowed himself a brief pause, standing quietly beside the chariot as the morning continued its slow, predictable rhythm. With the balance of the chariot tested and confirmed, the charioteer turned his attention to the reins. The reins lay loosely across the front of the chariot, long and quiet, their leather darkened from repeated use. Adjusting them to a comfortable length was a gentle task, one that required no haste. He lifted the reins slowly, letting them slide through his hands. The leather moved smoothly, producing only a faint sound as it shifted. He gathered them evenly, ensuring neither side pulled more than the other. The motion was calm and unhurried. The charioteer stood in his usual position and held the reins lightly, testing their length. He did not pull. He simply held them and waited, feeling how they rested in his hands. After a moment, he adjusted them slightly, shortening one side by a small amount. He stepped back and tested again. The reins now fell naturally, neither too loose nor too tight. He shifted his grip once more, making a final, careful adjustment. Each movement was small, measured, and deliberate. He let the reins hang briefly, watching how they draped over the chariot's front. They fell evenly, without twisting or crossing. Satisfied, he gathered them again and held them as he would during a ride, maintaining a relaxed posture. The charioteer closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the steady movement of the horses at a walking pace. He adjusted his hands once more, just enough to ensure comfort over time. The reins felt familiar and dependable. Once finished, he secured the reins loosely, placing them where they would be easy to reach later. He did not tie them tightly. They rested calmly, ready without tension. Adjusting the reins did not change the chariot's appearance, but it improved the quiet readiness of the setup. Everything now felt balanced, prepared, and comfortable. The stable remained peaceful. No one hurried. The horses remained still, their presence steady and reassuring. With the reins adjusted, the chariot stood complete in its preparation. Each small task had added to the calm, unbroken rhythm of the morning, making the moment feel slow, steady, and settled. With all preparations complete, there was nothing left to adjust. The chariot stood ready, balanced and still, and the reins rested neatly in place. Now came a period of waiting. This waiting was not tense or uncertain. It was calm, expected, and unremarkable. The charioteer stood beside the chariot, hands resting loosely at his sides. He did not check anything again. There was no need. Everything had already been examined, tightened, aligned, and prepared. The morning allowed for stillness. He shifted his weight slightly, then became still again. The ground beneath his feet was firm and cool. The air felt quiet and steady. No voices carried through the stable. No sudden sounds broke the calm. Nearby, the horses remained patient. They breathed slowly, their movements minimal. An ear flicked, a hoof adjusted in the straw, then stillness returned. The charioteer noticed these small motions without reacting to them. Time passed gently. There was no clock to measure it, only the slow progression of light and shadow. The charioteer waited without expectation, allowing the moment to stretch. He rested one hand lightly against the chariot's frame. The wood felt solid and familiar. The chariot did not shift. It remained as steady as it had throughout the morning. Waiting was part of the routine. It allowed everything to settle. The horses. The chariot. The charioteer himself. No action was required yet, and so none was taken. As he waited, his breathing slowed naturally. Each breath came and went without effort. His thoughts did not dwell on anything in particular. There was no plan to review, no task to reconsider. Eventually, he stepped onto the platform once more, not to ride, but simply to stand. He remained there quietly, hands resting on the reins, eyes open but relaxed. The chariot did not move. This moment of waiting marked the transition between preparation and motion. It was calm and unimportant, yet necessary. The ride would begin soon, but for now, stillness remained. The stable continued to hold its quiet. The chariot waited. The horses waited. And the morning, slow and patient, waited with them. After the long, quiet wait, the moment to move finally arrived. There was no signal or announcement. The charioteer simply shifted his stance and prepared to step forward. Everything happened slowly, without urgency or excitement. He adjusted his grip on the reins, holding them loosely. There was no need to pull. The horses sensed the change in posture and responded calmly. One hoof moved forward, then another. The chariot followed, rolling gently across the ground. The wheels turned with a soft, steady sound. There was no jolt or sudden motion. The chariot moved at a walking pace, slow enough that each rotation of the wheel could be felt rather than seen. The movement was smooth and even. The charioteer stood quietly, allowing the chariot to move beneath him. He did not shift his weight unnecessarily. He let the platform carry him forward as the horses walked. Each step of the horses created a gentle rhythm. Step. Pause. Step. Pause. The chariot responded in time with this pattern, rolling forward and settling after each movement. Nothing rattled. Nothing pulled. As they moved, the stable surroundings passed slowly. Wooden posts, shadows, and patches of light drifted by at an unhurried pace. There was time to notice everything, though nothing demanded attention. The charioteer kept his eyes forward, not focused on any specific point. His breathing matched the slow motion of the ride. Inhale. Exhale. Each breath felt steady and natural. The reins remained light in his hands. He made no corrections. The horses knew the path and followed it without hesitation. The chariot stayed aligned, balanced, and calm. The walking pace allowed everything to settle further. The wheels warmed slightly as they turned. The leather straps moved gently, producing soft, familiar sounds. The chariot felt like an extension of the ground itself. There was no rush to reach any destination. The movement itself was the purpose. Step by step, the chariot advanced, carrying the charioteer forward in a smooth, predictable rhythm. This slow beginning set the tone for the ride. It was not fast or dramatic. It was steady, quiet, and controlled. The morning continued its calm progression as the chariot rolled forward, one gentle step at a time. As the chariot continued forward at a walking pace, the most noticeable thing was the sound. Not a loud or sharp sound, but a steady pattern made by hooves and wheels working together. The charioteer listened without focusing, letting the rhythm settle naturally. Each hoof touched the ground in a calm sequence. One, then another, followed by a brief pause. The wheels answered with their own soft rotation, turning smoothly and without complaint. Together, these sounds formed a gentle, repeating cycle. The charioteer did not count the steps. He did not track the distance. He simply allowed the rhythm to exist. The pattern repeated itself without change, creating a steady backdrop that required no attention. As the horses walked, the sound of leather shifting added another layer. Straps moved slightly with each step, then became still again. The noise was quiet, familiar, and unremarkable. The wheels rolled over the ground evenly. There were no bumps or sudden changes. The surface beneath them remained consistent, allowing the sound to stay soft and predictable. Nothing interrupted the flow. The charioteer's breathing naturally matched the rhythm. Inhale as the hooves stepped. Exhale as the wheels turned. The pattern did not need effort or control. It happened on its own. Occasionally, a small sound rose briefly, perhaps a wheel touching a stone or a strap brushing against wood. These sounds faded quickly, returning the rhythm to its original calm state. The charioteer's posture remained relaxed. His hands rested lightly on the reins, not moving unless necessary. He felt no need to adjust anything. The ride continued exactly as expected. Listening to the hooves and wheels did not require thought. The repetition was soothing, allowing the mind to drift without direction. The sound became background, steady and constant. Time passed slowly, marked only by the continuation of the rhythm. The chariot moved forward, step by step, wheel by wheel, without variation. This quiet harmony between horses and chariot carried on, unbroken and calm. The rhythm did not change, and there was no reason for it to. The ride continued in steady silence, guided by the simple, predictable sounds of movement. As the chariot continued forward, the surroundings began to change slowly. The stable gave way to streets that were well known to the charioteer. These streets had been traveled many times before, and nothing about them felt new or surprising. The ground beneath the wheels remained firm and steady. Stone and packed earth passed beneath the chariot at an unhurried pace. The wheels rolled smoothly, adjusting naturally to the surface without interruption. Buildings appeared along the sides of the street. Their walls were plain and familiar, showing the quiet wear of everyday use. Doors remained closed. Windows reflected soft light. Nothing drew attention. The charioteer kept his gaze forward, not studying any single detail. He allowed the street to pass by without effort. The horses continued their steady walk, unaffected by the surroundings. Occasionally, a person stood at the edge of the street, watching quietly or tending to a small task. These figures did not move quickly. They existed briefly in view, then passed out of sight as the chariot continued on. Sounds remained minimal. Footsteps, distant voices, and the soft echo of movement blended together gently. None of it rose above the rhythm of hooves and wheels. Shadows shifted slowly across the street as the morning light changed. The chariot passed through these patches of light and shade without pause. The transitions were smooth and unremarkable. The reins rested loosely in the charioteer's hands. There was no need to guide the horses sharply. They knew the path and followed it without hesitation. Passing through familiar streets brought no excitement. It was a continuation of the calm that had begun in the stable. Everything felt steady, predictable, and quiet. Time moved without being measured. The charioteer did not consider how far he had gone or how far remained. The ride existed only in the present moment. As the street continued ahead, unchanged and steady, the chariot rolled onward. The familiar surroundings faded gently behind, replaced by more of the same. The ride continued, calm and unbroken, guided by habit rather than intention. As the chariot continued through the familiar streets, the surface beneath the wheels became slightly uneven. Small stones and pebbles were scattered across the packed earth, creating subtle changes in the way the chariot moved. The charioteer paid attention, not out of concern, but to notice the gentle shifts beneath him. He felt the wheels roll over the first few stones. The movement was minor, an almost imperceptible lift and settle. The chariot remained balanced, but the change in weight was noticeable through the platform beneath his feet. He adjusted his stance slightly, leaning ever so lightly, though the motion was minimal and deliberate. Each step of the horses added to the sensation. As a hoof landed on solid earth or rolled over a small pebble, the weight shifted subtly. Forward, back, side to side, each movement was measured and smooth. There was no jolt or sudden tilt. The charioteer felt only a quiet variation in the platform beneath him. He continued to observe, letting the sensations register slowly. The shift was rhythmic, almost imperceptible at first, but consistent. Step, settle, step, settle. The movement was repetitive and calming in its predictability. The reins rested lightly in his hands. He made no adjustments unless necessary. The horses navigated the stones naturally, aware of the unevenness without needing guidance. The chariot responded obediently, following their lead. Occasionally, a slightly larger stone caused a very gentle bump. The charioteer acknowledged it without reaction. There was no rush. There was no urgency. The small disruptions were simply part of the journey, absorbed naturally by the wheels and frame. The sound of movement over the stones was faint and steady. A soft crunch, a slight scrape, and then nothing. The rhythm returned to its familiar cadence. Step of the hoof, turn of the wheel, gentle shift of weight. Step, settle, step, settle. Time passed quietly as he experienced this subtle variation. The street stretched ahead, unchanged in direction, filled with familiar sights and quiet, slow motion. Nothing demanded attention beyond the gentle, unhurried awareness of the chariot's motion. Feeling the weight shift over small stones became a meditative exercise. Each small change reinforced the calm, steady pace of the ride. The chariot, the horses, and the charioteer moved together in gentle harmony, patient and unhurried. With this sensation noted, the ride continued at the same walking pace. Small bumps and shifts remained subtle, unnoticed by the world beyond, but fully registered within the slow, deliberate rhythm of the morning. After traveling slowly through the familiar streets and feeling the gentle shifts of weight over small stones, the charioteer began to prepare for the next pause. The horses were calm, the wheels had turned steadily, and the chariot had moved without incident. It was time to slow even further and bring the ride to a brief, quiet stop. The charioteer adjusted his hands lightly on the reins, holding them gently but with awareness. He did not pull sharply. Instead, he simply allowed the horses to sense the slowing motion. Their steps became smaller, more measured, as the chariot gradually reduced its forward movement. The wheels responded smoothly, rolling less with each passing moment. The sound of movement softened, blending with the occasional scrape of leather straps and the faint shifting of the chariot's frame. Step by step, the motion slowed to almost nothing. The charioteer shifted his weight slightly, feeling how the platform beneath him became still. He pressed lightly with one foot, then the other, ensuring that balance remained consistent even as forward momentum disappeared. The chariot remained stable, patient, and quiet. The horses adjusted naturally. Their hooves made soft, deliberate contact with the ground. Each step was gentle, careful. There was no rush. There was no noise beyond the faint, steady rhythm of slow movement. The reins were loose in the charioteer's hands, but under subtle control. He allowed himself a moment to breathe slowly and evenly. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. The repetition of the breath mirrored the slowing rhythm of the wheels and hooves. Each tiny motion reinforced the calm, deliberate pace of the morning. As the chariot came to a complete stop, the charioteer eased himself slightly forward, resting his hands lightly on the front frame. The horses stood quietly, breathing steadily. Nothing moved abruptly. The wheels were still, the frame was balanced, and the chariot rested as patiently as it had moved. He glanced around at the familiar streets, now briefly frozen in stillness. Shadows shifted slowly as the light continued to change. Dust and small stones lay undisturbed, having fulfilled their minor role in the gentle motion. Preparing to stop was not about hurry or urgency. It was a slow, deliberate act, marking the end of one segment of the ride and allowing a pause before anything else happened. The chariot, the horses, and the charioteer existed together in quiet equilibrium. With everything at rest, the morning remained calm and unbroken. The chariot waited patiently, ready for the next small movement when the time came. And for now, nothing more was needed. With the chariot resting quietly, the charioteer allowed himself to notice the subtle details of the environment. A gentle breeze passed through the streets, moving softly across the horses' backs and brushing lightly against the wooden frame of the chariot. He stood still, hands resting lightly on the reins, feeling the air move around him. The breeze carried faint scents from the surroundings. Dust from the road, dry straw, and a hint of distant wood smoke. Nothing was sharp or intrusive, each smell was soft, familiar, and calm. The charioteer tilted his head slightly, letting the breeze brush across his face. Hair shifted slowly in response, and he felt the quiet movement of air on his skin. The horses, too, sensed the breeze, flicking their ears or lifting their heads just enough to acknowledge it. Their motions were subtle, almost imperceptible. He noticed how the sunlight interacted with the breeze. Small shadows from leaves above danced lightly across the street, shifting slowly as the air moved. The chariot remained still beneath the changing light, its wooden frame warm and steady in contrast to the soft patterns overhead. The reins hung loosely, untouched. The horses remained calm, their breathing slow and even. Nothing moved abruptly. The breeze passed through naturally, creating a sense of rhythm without urgency. The charioteer took slow breaths, inhaling the quiet scents and exhaling gently. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. The rhythm of his breathing mirrored the movement of the breeze, small and repeated, creating a sense of calm continuity. Even the small details, the slight rustle of straw, the faint sound of distant footsteps, and the quiet brushing of a horse's mane, added to the peaceful atmosphere. Each was minor, subtle, and unremarkable on its own, but together they created a gentle, steady background. He allowed himself to remain fully present in this moment. There was no task, no preparation, no concern. The chariot, the horses, the street, and the air itself all existed in quiet harmony. Time passed slowly, measured only by the gentle shift of the breeze and the soft patterns of light and shadow. Nothing hurried. Nothing demanded attention. The morning continued its calm, steady rhythm. Eventually, the charioteer released a small sigh, neither of relief nor impatience, simply marking the passing of time. The breeze continued, indifferent and soft, and the chariot waited patiently as it always had. With the gentle breeze moving through the street, the charioteer shifted his attention to the wheels of the chariot. Though they had been cleaned, inspected, and tested earlier, he now simply noticed their warmth. The sunlight, slowly rising higher, touched the wood and metal in a soft, even glow. He reached down and rested a hand lightly on one wheel. The surface felt pleasantly warm, neither hot nor uncomfortable. The sun had kissed the bronze fittings and the wooden rims, creating a subtle contrast between shadowed and sunlit areas. It was neither striking nor dazzling, just steady, quiet warmth. The charioteer moved his hand along the circumference of the wheel slowly, feeling the smooth wood and the faint heat from the bronze. Tiny scratches and indentations, long unnoticed, registered gently under his fingertips. He did not make a note of them, nor did he adjust anything. Observing was enough. He repeated the same motion on the other wheel, moving deliberately and unhurried. The warmth continued there as well, spreading evenly across the surfaces. The sensation was constant and calming, a reminder of the slow, steady passage of the morning sun. The horses shifted slightly nearby, their bodies warmed by the same light. Their movement was minimal, quiet, and unimportant. The reins remained slack in the charioteer's hands, who continued to observe rather than act. Everything remained calm, steady, and prepared. As he leaned slightly closer, the charioteer noticed how the sun highlighted tiny textures on the wood. Grain lines became visible, following gentle curves along the rims. The bronze fittings reflected light in small patches, creating soft glimmers that moved as he shifted his gaze. Nothing about it was dramatic. He pressed lightly on the hub of the wheel, testing its stillness. It did not move. The weight of the chariot, combined with the warm sunlight, created a quiet sense of solidity. The charioteer allowed his hand to linger for a few moments, simply feeling the wheel's balance and presence. The air was still, except for the soft breeze from earlier. Sounds remained faint, distant voices, the soft shuffle of straw, and the occasional low breath of a horse. None of it disturbed the calm observation of sunlight and warmth. With the wheels warmed and steady, the charioteer straightened and stepped back. The chariot remained patient, ready, and quietly illuminated by the sun. Nothing more needed attention. The moment existed simply for feeling, observing, and waiting. After feeling the warmth of the sun on the wheels, the charioteer allowed his eyes to wander slowly across the street. The sun had moved higher, and shadows stretched across the ground, changing the appearance of familiar buildings and surfaces. He observed them without hurry, noticing how the light shifted gradually over time. The shadows were soft and uneven, moving slowly with the progression of the day. A low wall cast a long, narrow shadow across the street, while a wooden post beside it produced a thin, darker line. The charioteer watched the shadows lengthen, blend, and fade into one another in quiet, unhurried motion. The chariot remained still beneath the changing light. The horses stood calmly, their ears flicking occasionally as they listened to the faint sounds of the street. The reins hung loose in the charioteer's hands, untouched, and the platform beneath his feet felt steady and secure. He leaned slightly forward, resting his hands lightly on the front frame, allowing his gaze to follow the shadows as they stretched and shifted. Nothing moved abruptly. Nothing drew sudden attention. The slow progression of light and dark was all that existed, steady and calm. Small details became noticeable when he looked closely. A window's shadow moved across a rough patch of stone. Tiny gaps between wooden boards caught the light differently. Dust particles, suspended in the sun, glimmered faintly. Each observation was subtle, unimportant, yet satisfying in its quiet rhythm. The charioteer breathed slowly, matching the calm passage of shadows. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Each breath was steady, as if it were synchronized with the gentle movement of sunlight and shade. Nothing required effort, nothing demanded attention. The street, the shadows, and the chariot existed together in quiet harmony. The horses shifted slightly, a soft shuffle of hooves in the straw beneath them. The wheels, still warm from the sun, reflected small glimmers of light here and there. The effect was gentle and consistent, adding to the slow, steady pace of the morning. Time seemed to stretch, marked only by the slow changes in shadow and light. Step by step, hour by hour, the day continued forward, though without urgency. The chariot, the horses, and the charioteer remained calm, patient, and steady. Watching the shadows lengthen was not a task, but a quiet moment of observation. Nothing needed to be done. Everything continued naturally, at a pace that invited stillness and ease. After observing the slow movement of shadows across the street, the charioteer turned his attention once more to the surface beneath the wheels. The road, though familiar, was never perfectly smooth. Small stones, patches of packed earth, and tiny dips created subtle changes in the chariot's movement. He shifted slightly, placing his hands lightly on the reins. The horses continued their gentle walk, responding naturally to his presence. The chariot moved forward slowly, and the charioteer noticed the slight unevenness in the platform beneath his feet. As a small stone passed beneath a wheel, he felt the soft lift and settle, almost imperceptible but real. The weight shifted gently, forward, then back, side to side, in a rhythm that required no action. He allowed his stance to absorb the motion naturally. The sound of the wheels on the uneven surface was faint, a low, steady scrape combined with the soft impact of hooves on earth. Each tiny change was gentle, predictable, and consistent. There were no jolts, no surprises, only the calm, continuous adjustment of the chariot to its environment. The charioteer breathed slowly, matching the subtle rhythm of the movement. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Each breath was steady, echoing the soft lift and settle beneath him. The sensation was repetitive and soothing, a quiet meditation in motion. The reins hung lightly in his hands. He made no corrections unless a minor adjustment was necessary. The horses moved without urgency, stepping carefully over the small stones and uneven patches. The chariot responded obediently, gliding with soft, measured shifts. He allowed his mind to follow the small, constant variations. Each slight bump or tilt carried no significance beyond the sensation itself. There was nothing to react to, nothing to change, and nothing to hurry. Time passed quietly, marked only by the slow, unbroken movement of the wheels and the steady steps of the horses. The street remained familiar, lined with simple buildings and faint patches of sunlight. The unevenness of the road added a gentle variation, like a heartbeat beneath the calm surface. Feeling the slight irregularities in the road again reminded the charioteer of the ongoing rhythm of the journey. Each step, each small adjustment, carried forward the same steady calm that had begun in the stable and continued through the streets. The chariot moved slowly, predictably, and comfortably. The morning remained gentle and unhurried, with every small sensation contributing to the quiet, soothing pace of the ride. As the chariot continued its gentle, slow progression, the charioteer allowed himself to notice the subtle scents that filled the street. The familiar mixture of earth, dry straw, and faint wood smoke drifted lightly through the air, carrying no urgency, only quiet presence. He inhaled slowly, drawing in the calm, familiar smells. The earthy scent of the packed road mixed with the dryness of the straw beneath the horses' hooves. Occasionally, a hint of wood smoke from a distant hearth floated by, barely noticeable. Each element combined into a soft, consistent atmosphere. The charioteer did not dwell on the smells. He did not identify them with thought or memory. He simply allowed them to exist, letting each scent settle gently in his awareness. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. The rhythm of his breathing matched the quiet, unhurried presence of the air. The horses moved steadily, their breaths warm and soft, carrying the faint aroma of straw and earth upward. The reins rested lightly in the charioteer's hands. He made no adjustments. He simply observed, letting the sense enhance the quiet pace of the ride. Small variations passed through the air. A slightly stronger puff of wind carried more dust from the road. A brief swirl shifted a bit of straw into view. Each movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet the charioteer noted it with calm awareness. Nothing demanded attention or action. He inhaled again, feeling the slight coolness mixed with the warmth of the sun on the wheels. The combination of air, light, and gentle movement created a quiet sense of comfort. The smells grounded him in the moment, reminding him of the slow, predictable rhythm of the morning. The street remained calm. Shadows shifted faintly across the buildings and ground. The wheels rolled over the familiar unevenness of the road. The charioteer continued to notice small changes, the tilt of the chariot over a tiny stone, the subtle movement of a leaf in the breeze, but nothing disturbed the overall calm. In this way, the faint smells of earth and straw became part of the ride, a quiet companion to the rhythm of hooves, wheels, and gentle motion. Each inhalation and exhalation reinforced the still, patient pace of the morning. The chariot moved slowly, predictably, and comfortably. The horses walked steadily. The smells continued, soft and unobtrusive, as if part of the quiet, unbroken atmosphere that surrounded the charioteer and the chariot alike. Time passed gently. The air remained calm. The morning continued slowly, measured only by subtle sensations and the quiet, steady motion of the ride. As the chariot continued its slow, steady movement, the charioteer took a moment to adjust his posture. Standing on the platform for an extended period could become slightly tiring, even at a walking pace, so a gentle shift was necessary to remain comfortable. He began by shifting his weight slightly from one foot to the other, feeling the evenness of the chariot beneath him. 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, then back again. The movement was minimal, deliberate, and unhurried, designed only to relieve small areas of pressure. Next, he bent his knees just enough to relax the joints without changing his balance. The chariot remained steady, responding naturally to these slight movements. Nothing rocked. Nothing wobbled. The platform stayed calm beneath him. The charioteer straightened slowly and rolled his shoulders gently, letting the tension in his upper body ease. His hands, still resting lightly on the reins, moved slightly with the motion. The reins remained loose, and the horses continued walking steadily without adjustment. He allowed his spine to align naturally, feeling the subtle balance of weight through each leg. He did not force himself into a rigid position. Instead, he found the neutral stance that allowed the longest period of standing without fatigue. He adjusted the placement of his feet again, turning them very slightly to match the slope of the road. The chariot responded smoothly to these small movements, remaining balanced and predictable. Step by step, tiny shift by tiny shift, he maintained comfort without haste. The breeze from earlier continued to move gently, brushing past his face and shoulders. It mingled with the warmth of the sun on the wheels, creating a mild contrast of sensations. He allowed his posture to respond subtly to these elements, leaning ever so slightly into the movement without forcing anything. Breathing remained slow and calm, matching the rhythm of his gentle adjustments. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The pattern reinforced the quiet pace of the ride, letting the body settle comfortably over the moving platform. Even small adjustments took time. Each movement was repeated deliberately, ensuring nothing shifted abruptly. The charioteer did not rush, nor did he hurry the motion. It was all part of maintaining calm comfort. With his posture adjusted, the charioteer felt steady and supported. The chariot remained balanced. The horses continued their slow walk. The road beneath was familiar, the air calm, and the morning light steady. Everything existed together in quiet harmony. With his posture adjusted and the chariot moving steadily, the charioteer allowed himself to notice the faint sounds of the environment. Among the quiet rhythm of hooves and wheels, there was a soft, barely audible rustling, the movement of leaves in the gentle breeze. He listened carefully, though not with urgency. The leaves were on small trees and wooden posts lining the streets, shifting slightly as the wind passed. Each tiny movement created a soft whispering sound, steady and predictable, blending seamlessly with the other ambient noises. The charioteer did not focus on any particular tree or leaf. He simply acknowledged the presence of the sound, allowing it to fill the quiet space around him. It was soft, calm, and entirely unobtrusive. Step by step, the horses continued walking, and the wheels turned in time with the gentle rustle. The movement of the leaves was irregular but soothing. Occasionally, a larger leaf shifted and created a slightly louder sound, which then faded quickly into the background. Nothing about it demanded attention, and nothing changed the rhythm of the ride. He adjusted his stance slightly again, leaning very subtly to one side and then the other, but only enough to feel comfortable. His hands remained light on the reins, barely moving as the horses followed the path naturally. The chariot responded obediently, smooth and even. The charioteer's breathing matched the rhythm of the natural sounds around him. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Each breath was slow, calm, and synchronized with the soft whisper of the leaves, the faint creak of the wooden platform, and the gentle rolling of the wheels. Sunlight moved gently across the street, illuminating the leaves and casting shifting shadows. The breeze, the sunlight, and the faint rustling of foliage combined to create a quiet harmony. Nothing rushed. Nothing drew attention too sharply. He allowed his mind to follow the movement and sound without thought or judgment. Each rustle, each small adjustment of the chariot, and each soft hoofstep became part of a slow, continuous pattern. It was a rhythm he could simply observe, without planning or effort. Time passed quietly, measured only by the slow rolling of wheels and the soft whispering of leaves. The chariot, the horses, and the charioteer existed together in steady calm. The street, the air, and the faint sounds of nature created a gentle, unbroken moment. By simply noticing the gentle rustle of leaves, the charioteer allowed the morning to continue at a measured pace, uninterrupted and steady. The ride remained calm, and everything felt balanced and unhurried. As the chariot continued its slow, steady journey, the charioteer noticed a shaded corner ahead. A building extended slightly over the street, casting a broad patch of cool shadow across the ground. He allowed the chariot to enter the shaded area without altering its pace, simply observing the change in temperature and light. The air beneath the shadow felt slightly cooler against his skin, a subtle contrast to the warmth of the sun on the wheels earlier. The difference was gentle, not startling, and it created a quiet sense of relief. He shifted his stance very slightly to feel the chill of the shaded air more fully, leaning lightly without affecting balance. The horses adjusted naturally, continuing their walking pace without any hesitation. Their breathing remained steady, slow, and calm, unaffected by the minor shift in temperature. The reins rested lightly in the charioteer's hands, loose and comfortable. The charioteer allowed his eyes to follow the gentle change in light. The sunlit street faded behind him while the shadowed ground ahead stretched softly in front. There were no sharp lines, only a gradual transition from light to dark, from warmth to coolness. He noticed small details within the shade. Tiny dust particles floated slowly in the air, catching faint reflections of sunlight from nearby edges. The texture of the stone and earth beneath the wheels appeared slightly different, more muted in color and tone. Nothing about it demanded action, it simply existed for observation. Breathing remained slow and steady, perfectly in tune with the unhurried rhythm of the ride. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The sensation of cool air against his face, combined with the soft sound of hooves and wheels, reinforced a quiet, calm state of mind. Even the smallest details, the faint sway of a branch, the quiet creak of leather, the soft shuffle of straw under a hoof, became part of the unbroken pattern. Each element contributed to the gentle, soothing tempo of the ride. Time passed gently. The chariot moved forward steadily, the shaded corner extending for several slow steps. The horses continued their calm walk, the wheels rolled evenly, and the charioteer felt a quiet balance in every minor shift of weight. The coolness of the shade lasted just long enough to create a small, subtle change, a reminder of the steady passage of the morning. The charioteer did not hurry. He simply observed, noticed, and allowed the moment to exist as it was. Soft, quiet, and unhurried. With the shaded corner behind him, the chariot continued its calm progress, ready to encounter the next gentle variation of the street, air, or light. As the chariot continued forward, the charioteer became aware of faint sounds carried by the morning air. Though the streets around him were calm, distant noises, soft, intermittent, and barely audible, reached his ears. The sounds were slow and predictable. A quiet hammer from far away, the faint creak of a cart rolling, and the occasional low murmur of voices, all softened by distance. He did not turn his head sharply or lean forward. Instead, he allowed the sounds to enter his awareness gently, observing them without judgment or curiosity. Each faint noise was minor, almost imperceptible, and blended seamlessly with the steady rhythm of hooves and wheels beneath him. The charioteer adjusted his posture very slightly, not for the sounds themselves, but to remain comfortable as he listened. His hands rested lightly on the reins, holding nothing tightly. The horses continued to walk at a calm pace, unaffected by the distant activity. The chariot moved smoothly over the familiar street, steady and balanced. He noted the timing of the sounds, though not in a deliberate way. The soft clink of metal, the murmur of voices, and the distant rolling of wheels each occurred sporadically, with gentle pauses in between. The gaps were as important as the noises themselves, creating a slow, meditative rhythm. Step, step, pause, step, pause. Each sound was like a soft punctuation mark in the quiet morning. The air remained mild, with the warmth of the sun and the occasional gentle breeze. The faint noises added texture to the calm environment, but they did not demand attention. The charioteer allowed himself to remain present, simply noticing the minor details and letting them pass through awareness as easily as he observed the shadows and the light. Breathing continued slowly and evenly, synchronized with the gentle movement of the chariot and the intermittent sounds. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The pattern reinforced the quiet rhythm, making the small sounds of distant activity part of a gentle, unhurried meditation. The horses shifted slightly with each step, the wheels rolled evenly over the road, and the charioteer remained calm. Time passed without urgency, measured only by the faint noises, the rolling wheels, and the steady pace of the ride. By listening quietly, the charioteer felt the environment fully, yet without distraction. The distant sounds added subtle interest, maintaining the calm, patient rhythm of the morning while keeping the experience slow, gentle, and soothing. After noticing the faint sounds of distant activity, the charioteer felt it was time to bring the ride to a complete pause. The morning had passed gently, with slow movement, steady rhythm, and quiet observation. Now, the chariot, the horses, and the charioteer would rest, even if only for a short while, before any further motion. He adjusted his stance slightly, shifting his weight evenly across both feet. The platform beneath him remained solid and balanced. The reins hung loosely in his hands, relaxed, with no tension. The horses continued their slow breathing, calm and patient, aware of the stillness and responding naturally to it. Step by step, he brought the chariot to a gradual halt. There was no sudden stop, no abrupt jolt. The wheels rolled evenly to a gentle resting position. The slight tilt of the road beneath was absorbed calmly by the frame, leaving everything steady and stable. The charioteer leaned lightly on the front frame, releasing any small tensions in his arms and shoulders. He allowed his body to settle, feeling the solid support of the chariot beneath his feet. The horses shifted slightly, resting their weight, but their movements were minimal and quiet. The reins stayed slack, resting gently without need for correction. He took a few slow, deliberate breaths, synchronizing with the final moments of movement. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The rhythm of breathing was steady and calm, echoing the slow, unhurried pace of the entire ride. Around him, the morning remained gentle and undisturbed. The soft sunlight, the occasional rustle of leaves, the faint smells of earth and straw, and the distant, intermittent sounds continued quietly in the background. Nothing demanded attention. Nothing required action. The world existed simply in a calm, patient balance. The charioteer allowed himself a moment of stillness, appreciating the slow, steady rhythm of the journey that had passed. Each minor observation, the warmth of the sun on the wheels, the coolness of the shaded corner, the gentle shifts of weight over small stones, remained in memory, quietly reinforcing the calm pace of the morning. The horses, the chariot, and the charioteer shared this peaceful pause. There was no need for movement, no need for noise. The world, for a brief time, existed entirely in gentle equilibrium. Finally, with everything at rest, the charioteer felt completely settled. The platform beneath him, the reins in his hands, the slow, calm breathing of the horses, and the quiet of the street created a moment of perfect stillness. No hurry, no rush, only steady, patient calm. And so, the chariot rested, ready for the next slow movement whenever it would come. For now, the morning, the street, the horses, and the charioteer were all content in their gentle, unbroken pause.